and welcome to episode 4 of our 6-part Amoris series, focusing on the document on family and marriage written by Pope Francis called Amoris Laetitia, or the Joy of Love. So far in this series, we've discussed how Pope Francis addresses the reality of everyday family life and offers a powerful vision for families rooted in God's love. In our last episode, we looked in detail at Pope Francis' meditation on love and his advice for couples. In today's episode, we'll look at the social dimension to Amoris Laetitia. Pope Francis states that families should not see themselves as a refuge from society, but instead go forth from their homes in a spirit of solidarity with others. Today, we'll explore how Amoris Laetitia highlights how Jesus calls families to a love that embraces everyone, a love that reaches out to all members of our families, from the first moment of life to the last. A love that cares for our neighbour and the most marginalised in our societies and in the world today. We'll shortly be joined by a panel of guests to discuss how we are called to respect life, to care for our neighbour, and indeed for our common home. Later we will hear from Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the President of Caritas. But first, let's take a look at this short video, which shows people standing in solidarity and love with their families and with their communities.
Kathleen changed our world. The fact that she's still here with us, she's now 10 years old, is just amazing. Kathleen Rose has got a condition called trisomy 13. She has an extra little bit on her 13th chromosome. We were told that she would be incompatible with life, that she wouldn't be able to do anything other than lie in the one spot. It took me as her mother a while to actually start to celebrate her life and to enjoy her. I always used to wake up and, peer into her cot. Was she still there? Was she still there? And then at a certain stage, I just thought, you know what? She is in God's hands completely. And I got a great peace when I just surrendered her life over to Him. From the outside, you would maybe think that she would be a burden on the family, but when you're living with her day in and day out, she just teaches us so much. At any time, her health could deteriorate and she'll pass away. She gives unconditional love. It's as if she says, "Mommy, I know that you're there, and I know that you're there, Daddy." Oh God, I'm gonna cry. So sad. She smiles and she hugs. She just shows nothing but love. It's just the presence that she brings. She's just a pure soul. She actually brings the best out in the children. They've learned to be less selfish, to be grateful for what they have, their abilities. She really has taught them generosity and helped them to be better at just loving, just showing love within the home. I think the children like Kathleen are actually very special jewels right in the midst of our families and our communities. They teach us how to be better people, how to love in a pure way. And I actually think they really teach us the full meaning of love.
Je l'aime parce qu'elle est une femme qui elle est belle et elle comprend ma situation d'handicap et elle m'aide. C'est pourquoi elle est une femme merveilleuse parce que bon, c'est pas tout le monde qui peut accepter épouser un handicapé.
Ekpona kuma gbonyere enyi musu ke bobona buidu ku enyi musu ke dena banamu bobona edu ku ne ahia va wene ni
Comme je suis handicapé, je ne peux pas me tenir debout. Ce travail, je peux le faire sur place. Je peux faire autre chose, mais ça me plaît de faire ce genre de métier. C'est avec ce métier, j'arrive à me nourrir, à supporter la famille. La vie est belle, la vie est belle. Pas tout le temps, hein. Il y a des moments qui arrivent qui sont difficiles, mais quand même, la vie dans son ensemble, elle est belle quand même. Je souhaite que mes enfants reste valide et qu'ils puissent grandir dans la paix, dans la crainte de Dieu surtout, et devenir une grande personnalité un jour.
بلشت الحرب عنا أنا كان عمري 16 سنة. في كتير عالم ما بتعرف إيش يعني واحد يعيش بالحرب. اجت فترة تطلع من البيت ما تعرف إذا أنت ممكن ترجع على البيت. هذا يمكن شعور كتير صعب ينوصف. أنت إذا عشته تماماً لتحس فيه. بالنسبة لإلي إنه شخص عايش هون يمكن ماني كتير مطلعة بالسياسة أو بأي شيء. بنظري الشيء اللي عشناه شيء قبل ما نكون إنه نحن سوريين أو شيء، نحن بالنهاية بشر. أنا وقت بكون بحاجة لشيء مسلم أو مسيحي كان ممكن يساعدني. يمكن بعد ما أخذت من هي البلد بهديك الفترة يمكن أنا لسه كنت صغيرة، بس أكيد لسه في كتير شغلات بتذكرها. وصلت لمرحلة إنه أنا هلأ صرت بعمر إنه بقدر أعطي لهي البلد. بالنسبة لنا نحن عم نحاول نساعد العالم المسنين يلي هن كبار بالعمر وما في حدا يكون عم بقدر يساعدهم.
هذا الكيس هلا فيه حليب، كيس حليب.
كل شهر نحن كل شهر بنعدي يوم لعند كل بيت. بالشهر بنحاول نفطر على كل البيوت.
انسان اجباري تتذكري.
بنقدم لهم هذا الشيء، بنسأل عن حالتهم، بنطمن عليهم، بنشوف إذا هن بحاجة لأي شيء يكونوا فيه، إذا نحن بنحسن نكون عم نساعدهم نأمن لهم إياه. بالنسبة لإلي أنا عم بقدم هذا الشيء من قلبي، بحب أشوف العالم عم بخلي حدا ينبسط. طبعا نحن كفريق كمان بنكون كتير مبسوطين وقت نكون عم نساعد هدول العالم.
We are Capuchins, followers of St. Francis, and our main concern is we show love for the people in need. When we started the Capuchin Day Centre in 1969, we had about 50 people coming to the centre, and now each morning we have about 250 for breakfast, and we have anything in the afternoon from 450 to 500 for dinner. Each Wednesday morning, we have anything from 1,600 to 1,800 people coming for food parcels. We put our trust entirely in God, and it is through the Holy Spirit that we are surviving, because we get 450,000 from the government and our running costs are 2.2 million. Without the generosity and the help of the people of Ireland, under no circumstances would we be in a position to keep our lifeline in operation. And I have no doubt about it, that it is through the Holy Spirit that all that is coming to us. We being the followers of St. Francis, we as St. Francis would love the people in need as they are our family. We treat the people coming for meals as if Christ himself was coming for a meal.
Hello and welcome back to the Amoris studio, where I'm now joined by my panel, and I have with me in studio Dr. John Monaghan, Dr. Lorna Gold and Father Brian Shortall. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
One of the challenges that Pope Francis is asking us to do is to reach out in love and solidarity with everybody that we meet. And it is a challenge to try and see each person the way God sees them. How do we do that?
Well, Wendy, I think these kind of stories that we've just listened to are really important in that. Like, these people are so courageous and exemplify that kind of love and courage and faith that Pope Francis talks about in Laudato Si. But it really struck me listening to this that this sense of community, of being one community, it's there in every culture. In Africa, they call it Ubuntu. Here, we would maybe call it community spirit. But that's really what we are called to in our families, to go out to go out into the community and be the backbone in some ways of that community, that society, and building up the sense that we're one human family.
The document is called The Joy of Love, and John, you, I'm sure, have been there at one of the most joyful and loving times in a family's life when a baby is born. In fact, you've done it thousands of times.
I don't know how many times exactly, but yes, I've done several thousand deliveries. The funny thing looking at that film was the beautiful child with trisomy 13, that some of the most rewarding and mystical experiences I would have had as a doctor have been where things have not gone well. They have been the most striking and in some ways heroic episodes that I've seen, women who would defend their child to the last. It was a very impressive, to see what a woman will do for her child. And unfortunately, I suppose, if we regard ourselves as evolved animals, you know, that we don't have any transcendent dimension to us, then we finish up regarding our patients or our other members of society as regard how useful they are, or on a doctrine of utility, where we say, well, if this person is not useful, then we will dispose of them. And of course, that's typified in abortion, but also in the care of the elderly, where euthanasia is becoming increasingly prevalent in Western societies. And indeed where, for example, in Canada, it has become compulsory for institutions that, like hospices, to provide euthanasia. And it has become impossible for doctors to reject it on conscientious objection without referring the patient for euthanasia to somebody else. So we're getting into a fairly low point in our existence if we can't see something in the person other than their usefulness.
One of the things that is talked about in Amoris is not shutting ourselves off from the world, not becoming insular, that we're just looking inwards on ourselves. And the world is really demanding of our time, and life moves at such a fast pace that sometimes we might be looking inwards without even realising it, and that stops us from going out.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, I think, one of the things that peppers, if I could use that expression, Pope Francis's ministry, not necessarily just in Amoris Laetitia or Laudato Si, but indeed in everything he says, this invitation to look out, to look outward. And, you know, that piece of tape there that we looked at, you know, shows all over itself the whole idea that the joy that can be had and the rewards that can be had and the difference that can be made by people who look out. And, you know, it seems to me that the happiest people, the most contented people on the inside are the people who look out, who reach out and who make a difference in people's lives, who roll up their sleeves. Many of them young people, not just here in Ireland, but indeed all over the world. And I know Pope Francis, you know, a man from a family himself, a man with a great love for his grandmother, a man who came from a lovely family unit in South America. He knows the secret, I think, of eternal youth, the secret of true happiness is about looking out, being missionary, looking outward, being missionary by being foreign missionary, but also being a missionary the minute you get out of bed in the morning, wherever you live. The joy is there for all to be had by reaching out as much as we can in solidarity with one another.
Well, we're going to come back to our panel very shortly, but right now take a look at this interview that I did recently with Cardinal Tagle, where he told me a little bit about his family upbringing and the influence that had on him, and indeed his reflections on Amoris Laetitia, as well as the work that he does with Caritas.
You know, Wendy, I grew up in a regular Filipino family. My parents were both working, you know, but it was a simple life at the time. Simple enough to help us, the children, to focus on what really mattered. Family, education, church. It was transmitted to the young mainly through the family. My own mother reminded me last year when they celebrated their 59th wedding anniversary. She said, yeah, you're a cardinal, you're a bishop, but I taught you how to pray. I taught you your catechism.
I wanted to touch on now just a little bit of your role with Caritas. I know you've visited lots of different places. Yeah. You've visited places like Syria and Lebanon. what has stayed with you from these trips?
You know, I've lost a lot of hours of, I could not sleep after visits, you know, not just because of jet lag or tiredness, but because of the suffering and the misery that you touch, you see, you smell. Really, it's an overwhelming experience. It touches all your senses, and the memory remains. You know, and I've lost hours of sleep, you know, because of that. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of the nobility of the human heart. Not only on the part of those who help and those who extend love and concern for, like, the refugees and the detained and the forced migrants, but in the refugees themselves. For example, in Nepal, we had a solidarity program to commemorate the first anniversary of the earthquake in Nepal. And we were divided into 3 groups. My group went to a village up in the mountains, in the district where 3,000 people died due to the earthquake. And I saw how poor the villages, I mean, they were already poor and now they're destroyed. But you know, we were welcomed by the villagers, and not even one Christian in the village. But they came out in their best clothing, with the best music that they could muster. They composed songs, they composed poems. They were not able to offer us lunch, for they had no food. They had no water. So we shared with them even hunger. But you could see the beauty of the human spirit. You could see the strength of the human heart, and the dignity that the poor possess. We may be poor, but we are human beings. And in their songs and in their poems, they recalled the horror of the earthquake. But immediately after that, they would say, 2 days, 3 days later, Caritas was here. The Christians were here. And then they start complaining about the slow rehabilitation that the government is doing, etc. And so they may not hear about Jesus formally, but they know in their folklore now is included.
They see the face of Jesus through the people who come to help.
They probably do not know the word caritas, what caritas means, this Latin word. So we had to explain to them. It is love. It is love. And we may not belong to your religion, to your tribe, to your village, to your ethnic group, but we are here. And for only one motivation, it's to love and to assist you, And that remains. And then I see love is really stronger than misery and suffering. And the human heart is capable of so much love.
Welcome back to the Amoris studio. You know, one of the things that has struck me most about this document and the clip that we just saw is so much of what we learn starts in our families and starts when we're growing up.
Yes, I was struck by the Cardinal's comment about learning to pray as a child. You know, it reminded me of my own youth, where my father, with regard to Sunday Mass, had to go out to 7 o'clock Mass because of his work. And we occasionally went with him, but it was striking to me over the years how he was faithful to that. And I think it rubbed off into our generation that he took the trouble, and I've often wondered what would my spiritual life be now if he had not done that. So I think that passes down through the generations. And as I got older myself, I suppose I retained my faith, but I saw my work as a doctor somewhat in a separate category. You know, they didn't seem to correspond very much, and I think that was from immaturity, maybe the era in which I grew up as well. But as I got older and maybe more experienced in dealing with women and their illnesses, maybe serious illnesses like cancer, I found that I was able to integrate my faith into it in ways that I didn't when I was younger.
I mean, I can relate to what you're saying, John, as well. When I was growing up, I grew up in a very, you could say, poor family. My dad was killed when I was young, and there were 4 of us under 7. My mum relied on really God's providence for us to bring us up. And yet somehow she managed, each morning we would say the prayer of St. Francis as we went out to school. It was the one thing we said, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me bring love. I can still remember the whole thing today. And she lived that as well. And our family, despite what she had to contend with us when we were children, she was always going out. She was always going out. She was always engaged in the local community, sharing whatever we had, and it was very little, with whoever we met. And I think that's definitely, thinking of myself and working for Trócaire, the Irish Caritas, it's really shaped my choices in life and my decision to work for Trócaire for many years.
Father Brian, you're currently in a parish in Dublin, and how we really need to reflect on the experience of Mass, and particularly in the Eucharist, and really using that experience to go out. There's a danger, though, that we can, as John said, compartmentalise and do the church thing, and then that's the end of that. How do we not get into that cycle or that habit?
One of the last things we say at the end of Mass is go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your lives, and that isn't easy at times in the world in which we live, because distractions, they're everywhere, so we are hijacked all the time by kind of messages that are really vying for our attention, social media messages, mass media messages, commercial messages, the world out there messages, news and so on like that, But it's so vital. So people every day, they may not be, Sunday Mass goers in the real kind of every Sunday sense, but their Christianity is very, very powerful in the way they're at the service of each other, in the way they look after one another in ordinary times, but especially when the tough times come. I've been so moved to see, for example, in a bereavement situation, people just roll up their sleeves and just get stuck in, That's a learning experience for me, and it's something that I feel ministered to myself by the people who I kind of minister to. And I know that kind of sounds like a cliche, and we've heard it before, but it's actually true. And the optimism of people, despite in many ways the difficulties that they may have, So I have to say I'm very, very honoured and very, very hopeful.
It's great to have that hope and to see it. And sometimes we just have to open our eyes to stop, to actually take these things in and to do them ourselves. How do we not get sucked into a throwaway culture? How do we do the opposite?
Well, I think Pope Francis talks about it now as being countercultural. It's a very strong term, but I think what he means is that if we want to teach this to our children about the value of things, the value of each other, it's really challenging. I'm a mum of 2 young children, and I think for me, the first thing is example. You have to try and set an example. So one thing for me is getting out into nature. That's an antidote to so many of the ills in society today, is to get out as families into nature and appreciate this world. And the funny thing is, when you're out in nature, in a forest, you forget about social media, you forget about advertising. It's rare that you see an advert when you're in a forest, except the advert for this amazing planet that we're living on. So that's one way, the practical way that I try to do it in the family.
There are two practical ways. Pay attention, listen. They'd be practical ways, you know. We were very good at it many, many years ago, and I think we still have the potential to be very, very good at it today. But again, as I said a little earlier, you know, we are competing with so many messages out there which are just demanding our attention. But if we breathe, if we think, you know, I think it's possible again to rediscover the beauty and the genius and the goodness innate in each family.
Well, I'd agree with all of that. And I'd also say, find an organisation, find a community group, just find something that you feel that you could do with your family that involves going out. So there's lots and lots of groups out there. Sometimes it's a bit bamboozling to choose, but find one that appeals to you, whether it's the befriending system with older people, whether it's helping out with your local soup kitchen, whether it's getting involved in the work of Caritas locally. Just find one thing and make a small commitment, and then just start and do it with your children if you can. You get great reward from it as well.
Well, my answer is the same as the first answer, but I call it Lego. If you spend time doing Lego with a child, which I never enjoyed Lego myself, you form a bond with them, and putting that time in, doing nothing in particular. It doesn't have to be any great act, but I think the bonds that you form with the child will help it to move out into the community and be a good person. I have a friend who has a large family in Northern Ireland, and he said, in our village, there's only two things you can do, drugs or football. So they're all doing football. And I think one of the most striking things about children as they grow into adolescence is the lack of genuine social activities where they can do wholesome activities or interact with members of the opposite sex. The facilities for young people are dreadful, which is why they're all spending their lives looking at a phone. They have nothing to do that brings them into contact with other people. So I think the answer is time and small activities.
Well, my thanks to my panel for joining us today. We'll have to leave it there, and thank you for joining us. Coming up in episode 5 of the Amoris series, we'll focus on the important and much discussed theme of mercy within Amoris Laetitia. We'll look at how the Church accompanies people who are experiencing difficulties in their relationships, and how, in the words of Pope Francis, all family life is a shepherding and mercy. So we hope you can join us again as we continue our journey through the joy of love.